You're live.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Shell McClue with BizChampz, and this is.
I'm Cynthia McClue with Ranch.
We want to welcome you today. We are interviewing Allison Drew, who is running for position 7 of Fort Bend ISD. Good morning, Miss Allison. How are you?
Good morning. I am doing well. How are you this morning?
We're doing great. We know that today is the last day of early voting, and we so much appreciate you taking the time out to speak with us in the community of Missouri City. I have a few questions for you, but before I get to those questions, I would love to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself to the community, those who may not know you and know about you, not necessarily your platform, but just as Miss Allison Drew, the person.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Yeah. I'm Allison Drew. I'm running for Fort Bend ISD Trustee Position number 7. And my name may sound a little bit familiar. I'm hoping it does. And that's because I am a former Fort Bend ISD trustee. I'm running to get back to the good work that I started while I was on the school board beforehand. I do have a day job when I'm not, and so what I do is I am an enterprise data architect, which is just really a fancy way of saying that I take data and I use it to come up with solutions that are data driven and just to make things communicate and work better. I'm also a psych nurse. I volunteer in the community, so you may know my name because I work with a couple of organizations that do prevent teen suicide. I also sit on the board of an organization that helps our local Fort Bend ISD students that are underprivileged, getting them services, getting them food. We actually do a food bank today, so just quite a bit of things that I do out there. I'm married to our director of fine arts for the school district. So you will see me at a lot of fine arts events. And that's a little bit about me.
Well, thank you. We really, really appreciate that. Cynthia, did you have anything for her before we get started?
No, let's just get into it. We got voting today.
That's right. So I want to start off with being that you were a trustee on Fort Bend ISD board before, and it was for a year and a half. Is that correct?
Yes, it was.
Could you explain why your term was short?
Oh, yeah. So I completed an expired term. We had KP George was elected to county judge, and he was on the school board at the time. So I was elected into his expired term to serve for a year, actually. And it ended up being a year and a half because we went into the pandemic. So
Thank you for that clarification. That was a question we were asked, so I wanted to make sure you were able to answer that. Being that you're running for position 7, which is the platform is the east side of Fort Bend, is that correct?
So we do something unique here in Fort Bend. And so although we can only apply for the position or, file for the position based upon East and West, we serve everybody, all of Fort Bend County. So yeah, so I live on this side, so I can file for an East side position, but I serve all of Fort Bend County, East and West.
Parents that live in Sugar Land or Richmond, they can still reach out to you for any concerns that they have.
Most definitely.
And that's important to know because I feel like everyone feels like there's such a huge division, but I feel like they still need to understand that as the board, you're making policy for all kids.
We sure do. We sure do.
Ms. Cynthia, did you have a question for her?
I have not really a question. I just want to propose something. I know there's been some ongoing battles with children enrolling in certain schools because my son is an athlete.
Okay.
And children enrolling in certain schools due to they wanting to play there. How can we prevent that from happening? Because I think there were some very big concerns last year. There were athletes playing at school districts where they did not live. So how can we as parents, and what would you tell voters to combat that issue? Because I think that's an ongoing underlying issue. It's kind of like something that's under the table right now, but people are not talking about. It's just mainly behind closed doors that we're dealing with right now.
Yeah, and we see this issue not only in terms of athletics, but in terms of academics and
Okay.
things of that nature. So I can say that what we need to improve upon is actually, having the school administrators. Police is a tough word, but really look into those things. I know that we do it for one of our feeder pattern schools because we were seeing this sort of academic preference towards that school,
Yeah.
and we just need to expand upon it. I think that we need to talk about it, right? One of the things that I did while I was on the school board, it was really important to me, was to have an E-team member. Actually, it was in the Marshall feeder pattern, but have an E-team member constantly having communication with the actual constituents of the community, because that's how those things come out, right? We've
Right.
got to get talking, and we've got to get into the community. We can't expect the community to come to us at board meetings. We've really got to work collaboratively and get into that community. So I think it just requires more discussion. That's something that I would definitely take on and say, hey, let's find ways, because there are ways. All of a sudden, there's a rental contract, and
Right, right,
so there are ways to determine that.
right. And it would be nice, is like they have maybe like a 211 number if you need to report something, that parents could call in and say, this is a concern of ours. Could you have someone look into it? So it would be nice to have such a department or a number that parents could call and voice their concern.
You say that, and we had a student app, actually, and I don't know whether it still exists. We rolled it out while I was on the board. It was called See Something, Say Something. So
Okay.
we were heading in that direction with Chief Ryder, and so it'd be interesting to see where we've gotten with that. But yes, I was on the board that thought, yes, especially for students, because sometimes you see something happening, and you don't want to be the person that anyone knows said something about it. So
Right.
yes, that we could continue that and make that a parent community level, whatever.
Yes, that would definitely help. And because I think there's a lot of things that, as parents, we want to bring to someone's attention, but just don't know how.
Right. So from your previous tenure on the board,
Absolutely.
I love that you already have some experience with our school district.
Mhm.
We still have some challenges when it comes to transportation. I know from my experience, I have sometimes my kids are not picked up at all. Sometimes the staff at the bus barn have to personally come and get my kids because they just don't have another driver to come back and circle back, those kinds of things. And I would love to hear a plan, which I have not heard a plan, on how to support the transportation system, because on the east side, Siena in particular, they're building another almost 6,000 homes. And that all feeds into Fort Bend ISD. And that's where we are. So even with them building, Ferndale and transitioning into elementary school, Thornton is over capacity as a middle school. And if that's 6,000 homes, that's a ton more kids. Maybe everybody don't have 8 kids like me, but they at least might have 2. So that's a whole bunch of more kids feeding into our district, which we want. But to be fair and to get them to school on time and to not also stress those employees, I just wanted to hear some of your thoughts of some of the things that you think we could start working on to help that.
And I'm probably going to sound like a broken record by the end of this interview, but one of the things that is really important to me is that community feedback, right? So I can say a whole bunch of things right now, but if I'm not talking to the community, and if they're not like on board, those things are just ideas, and we can definitely share about a few. I think that we need to start addressing transportation like we address some of our other things. I love data. Data is, to me, what's going to give you an accurate count, or even give you a projection as to what you need. And we need to not only be thinking about transportation as something that once we do it, it's done and it's right. No, it's forever evolving. So we need to think of it in the short term, the medium term, the long term, and plan accordingly. I'm on the school board that bought different buses so that we could get economical, and our gas prices went down because people aren't thinking about that either. And we could add more buses and add more routes. So I think like committees, audits, all this stuff where we can really actively talk about transportation. One of the funniest things for me is when my twins were in Fort Bend ISD, I had a transportation issue, and my transportation issue was my son played the trombone and there was nowhere to put it on the bus. Right. And so there are so many things that we don't think of, just off the cuff in moving students around. And so I know that we can get more savvy with transportation. I know we can start thinking about how we get more routes for student pickup without increasing the spend. So, and we it's a constant. I know that department has a high influx and outflux of drivers and so on. So we need to find ways to retain that staff, because quite frankly, if you have a bus driver that is consistent, you show that your pickup rates are better. So we've got to start feeding into that as a pathway and really providing some sort of stability in that career path in that arena. So those would be some of the things I would off the cuff just be thinking of doing.
And that's really important to hear you say. Some of the other things that I noticed, some of the transportation routes, since you brought that up, is some of the streets like in Fresno, those roads are not safe for the buses and the kids. They're very narrow. They're not lighted. So when they're picking them up early in the morning, they can't even see. So just the safety of the drivers and the safety of the kids. So I would love, like you said, more community involvement, I think would definitely help to make it better.
Absolutely.
I agree too.
Any questions for her?
No, she answered my big one.
Well, good. So, so one of the things I wanted to ask, because you brought it up in one of our other interviews, the federal government is considering cutting back a lot of funding. And I noticed one of the funding that was on the news this morning was about Head Start. And I know that you helped to implement early literacy. And it is very important for our littles. I mean, it's extremely important. I would love to hear, how do you feel how Fort Bend could step up in this gap? I know we still need funding to help those programs, but as you mentioned, sliding scales, I feel like absolutely the community would step into if that opportunity presented itself.
Oh yeah. We have a strong community here in Fort Bend. And so I've often been approached by people. I myself am a reading buddy. I teach students to read. I volunteer, go into our Fort Bend schools, and I do that. I know that our collaborative communities department would love to find ways to get more of our community in and doing those types of things. But from a funding standpoint, I'm completely disheartened, and I am concerned that with what is to come for us here in Fort Bend from a funding perspective. While I was on the board beforehand, and only a handful of board members have ever been selected. So within a year, I was selected to represent Fort Bend on Leadership TASB, so at the state level, to start advocating for funding. Because one of the things we have in Fort Bend, we don't have a poor enough poor, and we don't have a rich enough rich. So that funding formula does not work for us. So we need to, that may be our long term, but we need to be out there constantly advocating for funds. And we're good with the passing of vouchers and everything. We're really going to need to get vocal. We're going to need to amp it up. So it's real important that we get that done. So we start with the base groundwork, of advocating for funding for ourselves. The other part, the other things we can do, you're absolutely right. If we don't have that student reading by third grade, we know.
Yeah.
We know that we're not growing them to their fullest potential then.
Right.
So, we've got to start, finding ways to bolster our early literacy programs, and we need early identification. That's something that we need to kind of sharpen our toolbox with. We need to be out there identifying students early, because it's easier to close a smaller gap than it is to really take that large step. While I was on the board, one of the things real important to me is actual data. I love the data. STAR test is not helping me.
Right.
I don't need to know what you did last year. I need to know what you're doing now. So we need to, grow our own homegrown system for kind of actively being able to figure out where our students are so that we can meet their needs faster. And so, and we can work, I'm married to the director of fine arts. One of the best things I love is that they have a string program, and teaching young students to play an instrument is actually a learning device. I'm gonna date myself a little bit. I don't know if y'all remember Schoolhouse Rock, but anybody who does, Schoolhouse Rock taught us our words, our multiplication, our everything, things about bills and so on, and we can all still recite that to date. So incorporating that, we have those types of things here in Fort Bend. So just amping those things up. I am an advocate for Math Buddy. I want to see that implemented here in Fort Bend as well, because reading is important, but mathematics is also a source and just a different way to get that young brain working. So we really just, you can see I get excited about this, right? We can really get creative while we address our funding issue, which is what's essential, and still help train our young minds and train our students to grow to their most, the biggest potential that they can. So long-winded answer.
One of the things I seen, which I was extremely excited for, I seen a promotion advertisement for your pre-K3 program. But what saddened me was it's very limited to certain schools. It only had, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 schools. How can we expand that to other schools? Because if you're not in that zone and you have a 3-year-old, you will not be able to be enrolled in the pre-K3 program. But I was extremely excited to see it, though.
Yeah. As well as I am. Yeah, that's one of the difficulties that comes with funding, right? Because we're going to need the resource at the school, to be able to do those types of things. One of the things, so it's, and it may not resolve, a pre-K3 issues, but one of the things that I wanted to look into in terms of balancing sort of course equity across the system, because we hear that a lot with some courses. While I was on the board, we wrote our own curriculum, and then we went into the pandemic, and then we wrote asynchronous curriculum. So maybe utilizing some of the things that we have to offer, different programs in different areas. We'll have to look into it. That is something that, having the resource at a building is going to require funding, and vouchers is about to pull a lot of the funding that we have back. So we've got to get creative. I know that our colleges in the areas are also willing to pitch in and help, and we've got things that we do with them. So maybe we think outside the box here in Fort Bend and figure it out. But yes, with course equity and also program equity, we're going to have to get creative, because we don't have the additional dollars just yet until we advocate for it.
I have a question, and I think it's perfect because you love numbers like myself, and data. So as the community is listening to this and the parents are hearing this and they're like, thinking, okay, we just passed this huge bonds. We paid the school district has money. That's what they're thinking, because they hear funding issues, but they also feel like, okay, we know the school has money.
Right.
But could you just explain that, or give them clarity as far as what the bonds are usually set for, like how that's different from what's being funded in the schools?
So I think if I'm answering the question that you're asking, I think what you're just asking is what we can, there are certain things that we can use our taxpayer money for, and certain things that we have to use the bond money for.
So let me just clarify. Where is the money?
Right.
Where is the money?
Everyone's like, the school's getting
And our bond is like, it's for buildings. We have all of that earmarked. We look at ed specs. We do all of that stuff. And that's where that money is. And you can see it. I mean, if they want to look at where the money is, they can go to the sites, they can go out to the websites, see how it was allocated to be spent. I know that there are issues now that they are having to, figure things out that were unexpected. But, our bonds, I would say, our bonds are our buildings, that's basically what it is. One of the things that I would say is often interesting for me is that we, in terms of like our property taxes and what we send back to the state, we should be advocating to figure out how that works out better for us. Let's just put it that way.
Because I feel like a lot of people feel like, okay, we just passed the bond, all that money should go to the teachers and school supplies, and I don't think it's understood how that's separate.
Right.
Yes, that's separate. That's all separate. We can only allocate that money towards what we said it was for, basically.
Yes.
And so each time that we take out a bond, they spend a lot of time, a lot of energy pushing out, like, here's where this is where it's going. We're going to have this, we're going to have some technology, we're going to have this is what we're doing with this bond. And that money is pretty much only going to be able to work in that area. Okay. So yeah, we often, I would say, it's easy to misunderstand, and I don't want to get into make everybody's eyes kind of glaze over and get into the boredom of it. But yes, that money is earmarked to go towards other things. And we still have programs that we're required to do. And, funding is, it's a big formula that is multi-part. We get title funding, we can only do X with that. There's a lot of things that go into that. Mm-hmm.
So from your free, and I'm going to piggyback off of your experience, because I feel like it's so important for people to understand that you were in that position before. And so you saw the transition during COVID, and you saw the numbers that came out that showed, everyone's talking about, the report card that came out from the years right after, towards the end of COVID. Mm-hmm. How do you feel the public should be grasping those numbers? Should we be concerned, or should we be a little more understanding, because the pandemic literally just happened?
Yeah, well, a pandemic literally just happened, and it happened worldwide. So we're not just seeing those types of numbers in Fort Bend. I was literally in Jamaica. My family are educators, and we were having this conversation about how we're seeing this globally, and they're seeing it on their little island as well. And one of the bigger, so we're seeing the gaps. We're still struggling to move forward. We're also seeing that, the pandemic, with the removal of a socialization, like a whole year of socializing, we're also seeing, a gap there with our students worldwide, where they're not quite socializing where they should be and in the manner that they should be. So I think that you have to give grace for the pandemic, for sure. Right. I think you have to look at those numbers and give a little grace for the pandemic, because it was just a monkey wrench that we're still trying to actually, recover from.
Right.
Should there be concern? There should be some. There should be some less of a concern, more of a plan.
Okay.
We should not think we've arrived and we've done this. It's not time to pat ourselves on the back yet. There's still work to be done. There's still, we're still figuring out some of the data behind what happened during the pandemic. We're still trying to figure out how we close those gaps worldwide. This is not something that is just happening in Fort Bend. So we've just got to stay agile with it. We've got to be focused on closing those gaps. We've got to be focused on, you've got to be real flexible, because it brought in things that we just didn't know was going to happen. And so, I think that we should be hyper-focused on it rather than concerned, hyper-focused on it, hyper-focused on making sure that there's a plan, hyper-focused on being able to differentiate quickly what students need, what supports. And I think that we will get through it. I think as a world, we're all still kind of recover. I still see some gaps. I've been a reading buddy out there, and I see where, there were things that are missing, and that's all that we need to shore up. And that's what's, I think, difficult about it. It's different in every child.
Yeah.
Right.
Normally, it's a classroom and it's the same thing that you need to shore up. And now we have a real, I've got to titrate it down to a child level and then give them the appropriate support while moving along, right? So the ship is moving at the same time. So a difficult juggling act, but I think we can do it.
One of my final questions I have for you is catered towards safety on the campuses. Recently, even as this month, there's still on campus, violence. And I do know, like, all campuses have, I believe, at least one police officer. But, from someone that has experience and knows, what the requirements are and what the laws are, how can you at least let the voters know that safety is a priority for you, and some of the measurements that you feel, you can actually bring to the board to tighten up security, just to make sure that I know Katie is adding, certain things to their schools to implement. Do you feel that there's certain things that we could do as well, just to give that assurance? Because I do see a lot of parents speaking on pulling their kids out of public schools, just so that they can kind of control that part at least a little bit more.
Yeah. Safety is, once again, nationwide, specific to Fort Bend. I literally was talking to a parent just the other night about their safety issue with their student. And, we talk about, I hear it at my dinner table because, my husband being a director of fine arts, teachers and feeling safe and so on. So it's multi-tiered, right? It's students, it's staff, it's everything. And, I was on the board that started to really look at security and start to put, like, I miss him. I'll keep saying Chief Ryder's name, but, Chief Ryder, we did See Something, Say Something app. We, did the door locks and different things that we did to really bolster security. I think one of the things you said, it was actually, I was like, oh, here's my answer. We're ever learning, right? One of the things that we do as a board is we go to conventions and we learn from these other ISDs. Sometimes it's the smaller ISDs that are doing a lot more with less that give us ideas. So yeah, absolutely. Look at Katie, look at all of our sister school districts, and let's start implementing some of those things. I mean, we don't have to invent the wheel. It's out there. We can start addressing things. We can tighten policy to ensure that we are, in some way addressing, issues and that they are not going too far.
Yeah.
We've got to put safety on the forefront. I know that that's important for both our students and staff. And I'll say that my one concern is that we are not than creating some sort of school to prison pipeline. We've got to give a little bit more, tighten it up a little bit, but let's make sure that we are doing it conscientiously and in a manner in which that is fair across the board. So there's tons of things that we could do. I know there's tons of things out there. There are tons of vendors out there just speaking on these types of things. I'd say let's look at best examples. Let's look at our area schools. Let's see what's working.
Right.
Piggyback off of some of those ideas for sure. And I will say this because I'll give my little psych nurse plug as well. I was on the board that put 8 mental health facilities in Fort Bend ISD. And I want to say that when we see things where students are possibly hurting other students or behaving in a way that might hurt other students or what have you, there's a huge psychological component there. And we need to be giving supports there as well. And oftentimes, it's not just the student, it's the entire family. So when we had these mental health facilities put in place, it was with that in mind. Let's help the whole family and let's resolve some of these, let's get talking, let's resolve some of these issues, because we will see behavior issues go down when we start giving them the right social supports as well.
That's awesome. Ms. Cynthia, did you have any final questions?
No, I didn't. And then this last note, today is voting. And if you can tell the viewers anything, what would you tell them besides vote?
Oh, I would tell them this seat, position 7, is a very important seat. And that's because you will have a new board member in this seat. You are guaranteed to have a new school board member. And with everything that is coming down from the state level, you need someone that can hit the ground running, that understands what the task is at hand and can take it and run with it. You need someone that has done well, that understands the history, and it is that person, I believe, is me, because I just think that it is right now we're trying to turn this ship, and we need all hands on deck to turn this ship. And we cannot be learning on the job as we try to get ourselves back from a pandemic, and we are going into an unknown land of funding shortages.
That's right.
We need somebody that's there that really can be a true support for our Fort Bend ISD. So that's what I would say is, hey, it's early voting. It's the last day. You've got to get out and vote. It's very important that you come out and vote, and that you vote with our district in mind and what its needs are currently and how much it needs that.
Thank you.
But thanks for coming on the show. We really appreciate you. We're glad we have an opportunity so the voters can hear your side and also your expertise, and also a tremendous amount of experience that you have for that seat.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you guys for having me. Thank you for doing this format. I love it, by the way. Thank you guys.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Drew, for joining us on BizChampz. We will see you all next time.